I like, click, subscribe, do all that. You know what time it is. It's Netflix time. This movie's called The Stepfather. A series of mysterious events makes a teenager suspect that his mother's new boyfriend may be a dangerous serial killer known for preying on families. So it's a good old classic thriller movie. Came out in 2009. It's about an hour, 41 minutes long. Spoiler alert. Let's get it. So right at the back, we start with this guy named Grady Edwards. He got scissors and pliers and all this other stuff. Just shaving his face and whatnot. Regular routine, right? But as he's walking around the house, we see pictures of his family. Goes to the kitchen making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Yes, just a typical guy going about his day. Meanwhile, kids are laid out dead. Lady laid out dead. Yeah, done deal to ass. Somebody else just laid out dead. Notice how you got the Christmas wreath on the guardrails. Yeah, this nigga just out here killing people on Christmas in their own houses. Just walking around casually like everything's all good gravy. So apparently this took place in Salt Lake City. Now they gave a police report on a lady that he killed with the two kids had a restraining order on her ex-husband. So Grady was supposed to be the stepdad. Now the way he killed him, it looked like they could have strangled him or something like that because we ain't seen no blood. But they said everybody been stabbed with multiple stab wounds. There was blood everywhere. So I'm thinking to myself, they couldn't have found any way to trace it back to this guy. So I'm thinking to myself, Grady either does an excellent job at covering up his mistakes or the police do a terrible job at investigating. Honestly, I think it's a little bit of both, but he doesn't leave a paper trail though. So he escapes from there, goes to this grocery store to pick up some cookies. And he talks to this lady who happened to have her two kids at the store. He tells her his name is David and gives this lie about how his wife and daughter were in a car accident and died. Somehow when they get back to their cars, they get to talking. 6 months later, we got this guy named Michael coming by the house with his girlfriend Kelly. He's coming back from military camp and finally they get to be together. And she set up a surprise welcome home party for him. And then we have Julie again. This is her house. And Michael's actually Julie's oldest son. And Julie's also got another surprise for Michael. David's there. It turns out he's been living with Julie for 6 months and they're engaged to be married. I know he's thinking to himself like, man, what the fuck is this? To the left is Julie's sister Jackie. Now I'm pretty sure her friends have had this talk with her, but you gotta think to yourself, she don't know shit about David, she ain't do no background check, she's got 3 kids, and you about to get married to him within 6 months of knowing him. Get the fuck out of here. You cannot be this desperate for dick. Well anyway, David tells Michael he wants to meet him in the basement. He goes to the basement, got this whole thing set up. He's got cabinets, a freezer around, everything. Why does he got a bunch of cabinets with locks on them? What the fuck is that about? One cabinet he's got a stash of tequila in it. The good stuff. And then they get that toasted. Now the conversation here is getting him out of military school. He wants them to go to college out here. He wants to keep everybody together. Because he's all about family and keeping it together. But really he just wants everybody at arm's length and he don't want nobody out of his sight. Then Michael walks Kelly back to the car. Then David comes back out the house staring at niggas. And trust me, he does that a lot in this film. And then mom's like, you have to learn how to get used to him and all that other shit. But Mike just got back, he ain't trying to hear none of that shit. But mom's too sprung off David, she would've lost all sense of reality. Now I'm thinking to myself, if David's some type of real serial killer, and believe me, this guy is very meticulous. I'm thinking he would be very nervous about having sex. Because if this is somebody you intend on killing, they usually don't want to leave their traces of semen on the victims and whatnot. Because like I said, he doesn't leave a paper trail, he's very meticulous and very calculating. But he don't go by those rules, because he gives her the business. Mike's like, really? I ain't trying to hear this shit. So the next day after he gets off work, he gives Michael the keys to a locker room so he can be a swimming instructor. So he got him a job at this whole high school. That'll give him more incentive to go to college and not go back to military school. And then he talks to Kelly, everything's all good and gravy. Then we get this moment where mom tells one of the kids to turn down the video game and come get ready for dinner. And Sean's not listening at all, he's just playing games. Then David comes in and grabs him by the back of his neck. Forces him to turn it down and tells him to get ready for dinner. I'm like, really, dude? You had to do all that? Let's keep in mind, they're not his kids. Then he come back downstairs and watches Michael and Kelly make out in the pool. Just staring at him and shit. Then they all get together for dinner. Sean looking like he don't even want to eat. This nigga here. Then their real dad, Jay, comes to the door to pick up the kids. And he's just gonna take his kids to a Blazers game. Portland Trailblazers, son. And they gonna beat the Denver Nuggets too. Yeah. So David asks Michael, like, aren't you going to greet your father? He's like, no. So the story behind Jay is that he cheated on his wife with some co-ed, and they've been separated for a year. Michael hasn't talked to him since he left. He's only going to be in town for a couple more days, so he wanted to get the kids while that's going down. Yeah, you shouldn't want to deal with him because he cheated, but bottom line is, you're dealing with much worse that you don't know about. Next day, Julie talks about her neighbor named Mrs. Cutter, some old lady that collects cats. And she tells us that she's been looking at America's Most Wanted posters. And she says there's a guy in there that looks just like David. Michael gets a little suspicious, but not really. As he's leaving the house, he waves to Mrs. Cutler, who looks kind of spooked out when she sees David. He got that look like he's lining up his first kill. Then he meets Michael in this little restaurant. Starts talking about family again. And Mike catches him in a lie when Danny says something about his daughter being named Michelle or Lisa. Then he says his daughter's name was Lisa Michelle. My thing is, why you couldn't just say Michelle was the wife's name and Lisa was the daughter's name? You know what I'm saying? Bottom line, he's getting the stories conflicted, but not enough to throw Michael off. Later on, he gets frustrated putting up a for sale sign. And he's in real estate. He's helping people sell houses or give houses to people. Later on, he goes on the internet and he loads up his mugshot on America's Most Wanted. Miss Cutter gets a ring on the doorbell. She gets there, but ain't nobody at the door. She comes back in, the cat jumps out, obviously a jump scare. She's talking to one of the cats, but the cat got that look on his face like there's gotta be somebody behind you. And sure enough, this nigga attacks her and tosses her down the damn steps. Done deal, dead. Then he puts the cat by her, goes about his business like it ain't shit. Man, you just cold-blooded. Later on, Mike trying to give Kelly the business, but then this nigga come out the blue ruining it, just popping up out the corridors. And like I said before, he does this a lot. Later on, they back at the dinner table, and then Jay comes back over. He wants beef with David because of what he did to Sean. So he don't want to discipline his kids. He's absolutely right. That confrontation finally got him a one-on-one conversation with his son, who once again he hasn't talked to in like a year. Then David goes to Julie and he apologizes for what he did to Sean. It's a decent apology, but bottom line is she shouldn't have bought into the shit. Back at the office, David works for Julie's sister. She's basically been paying him under the table the whole time, but now she needs like social security work. She needs a whole bunch of paperwork from him. And they need a picture ID too, but obviously he's going to different aliases. He ain't doing that shit. So basically because he didn't comply to that, he's like, man, I'm quitting this job. I'm gonna find something different. Julie goofy ass didn't even question this shit, but Mike damn sure did. Later on, David gets a ring at the door. But look how he keeps his pencils in perfect order. Like I said, he's very meticulous. But most psychopaths are, honestly. Jay comes to the door, he's apologizing for what happened the other night. He invites him in, Jay asks him something about Oregon, and he catches him in a lie. But when Jay figured all this stuff out, it was too late and David bashed his head with a fucking glass bottle. Crazy thing is, he did this shit while both of the kids were upstairs playing video games. But of course they act like they ain't hearing nothing, they go back to playing video games. To that I say, what in all of the fuck? Then David gets a bag out the trunk, goes down to the basement, and puts both the bags in there. As he ends up choking Jay to death, he gets his phone. And it's actually Michael calling him. He left a message and then approached the door to the basement. David tells him everything's all good and gravy, he's fine. And for the second time tonight, he walked away from the shit and went back about his business. Meanwhile, Jackie talks about David at the job, and she's like, it seems very odd that he would quit when I asked him to fill out paperwork. Like, what does he got to hide? But of course, Julie takes it as a jab at her happiness, because she's like, man, I'm trying to get something popping, man. Y'all want to be hating. But once again, you ain't do a thorough background check on somebody, and you get married to this guy after 6 months. Well, anyway, David and Sean are bonding. When Jackie gets back to the house, she has her suspicions, so she's going to make a phone call to Jay. Then Mike tries to call Jay, and he gets a text message back, but obviously David's the one that's writing the text message. Now I'm thinking to myself, he's got balls to be using this nigga's cell phone where he has him buried in the fucking house. Like, really? I guess a couple of days went by and police found Miss Cutter. But I think it was more of a neighbor that found her in the position she was in. Then David gets a call from Jackie, who he sounds irritated by. She wants to fill out some more paperwork or whatever. And he's like, you know what? Alright, I got it. I got that strange feeling you the next victim. Then Michael and Kelly go over their college exams. They talk about the crazy shit that David's doing. Then they take a break, get all lovey-dovey in the pool. He tells her to forget about David. He's not that serious. And for the time being, he does. Then they about to get down to business. And once again, David comes through interrupted. So when David leaves out to go do something, Michael and Kelly start rummaging through his stuff. I'm thinking to myself, why didn't it start with the locked closets down in the basement? Well, anyway, he gets a call from Julie talking about they're going to pick up the kids, so he goes to make a U-turn. So now he's coming back to the house. He don't see him swimming, like, oh, shit. But he gets to the room, nobody's there. But they don't get caught. They back in the water. So Michael's kind of catching on to David. David's catching on to Michael. It's basically like he just gave Michael a warning, like, oh, shit. He got to look like, yeah, man, don't fuck around. So he's been looking up stuff online, and he's even more convinced now. Then they have this little argument, and then she storms off. Then she has a conversation with David in the kitchen. He tells her some stuff that sounds smart and creepy at the same time. It's weird. Then Michael tries to call his dad's phones again. And the phone's still ringing. He never put it on vibrate. I'm like, dude, if you get caught, that's on you. Everybody left messages. Specifically, Jackie left this one message. He's like, oh, shit. So Jackie's at home talking to her homegirl on Skype, and she started to do background checks. And she found out his name is not even in the registry as she's already about to go on vacation. David somehow finds out the information and cancels her flight plans. So the wind's blowing. She's almost about to miss her flight because one of the stand umbrellas fell into the pool. You really got time to be thinking about that shit, worrying about that? Man, you should have just caught your flight, because David would have caught up to you, and he wouldn't be drowning your ass. But now you out of here. Done deal, dead. Later on, Michael and Kelly about to find out once and for all what the hell is going on with David, so they're going to go downstairs and check the basement. And so because David put a lock on the door from the inside, he had to bust through a window on the outside of the house. So as they moved around making all types of noise, this motherfucker does not sleep. He still got his eyes open. Then Michael starts digging through the freezer. And yes, Michael saw his father frozen stiff in the damn freezer. Then David ends up smacking Kelly when she gets out of the car, drags her into the house. Then Julie wakes up all of a sudden, and as he's going to tirade, he calls himself Grady. Yeah, snap back into reality. The jig is up and he's about to kill you. And then the chase is on. Somehow she ends up stabbing him in his neck with a piece of glass that was broke. We thought he was done deal dead, but it turns out he's not. He's ready for more beef. They get to the attic and fight. People start dropping through the weak-ass dryboards. Then Mike fights David on the rooftop, which creates an epic fall to the ground. Both of them laid out. We get to the hospital and we find out Mike has been in a coma for like a month. The problem is David wasn't picked up when he was in the hospital. He was gone. So they don't know where the hell he is. Next thing you know, we cut to this girl wandering around with her 2 kids. And who shows up in front? This guy right here. Who greets her is now going by the name of Clyde. And the process starts all over again. Man, I got questions. You know he's had to done this multiple times before. I'm wondering how many times has he gotten away with this shit. Did he do all his crimes within Portland and Salt Lake City? How the hell was he getting away with this shit when he was leaving DNA everywhere? Blood samples and all that shit? Just because you change your name, you don't have no ID, and you don't have no paper trail, doesn't mean the police can't do their due diligence to trace the evidence back to somebody. You know what I mean? Well, anyway. The Stepfather on Netflix. Check it out. Like, click, subscribe, do all that. You already know what time it is. Sleep easy, Mr. Big. Could have got a slogan.